they all should be because, like you said, a lot of guys work on one or just some car lines. They don't work on. They may never see a European car in the shop.
Yeah.
It's all American, and like I said, in the dealership, it's really just one brand. So
Yeah. I mean, that's why, like I said, a lot of guys like that. And the only other thing you have to watch out now that a lot of these cars have their own, they have their own, what's the word I'm looking for? They have their own um, internet, or they have their own,
Their own land,
huh?
Servers.
their own
Yeah, they
network,
have
their
their
own
own
land.
servers. Yeah, and a lot of these companies now, though, you have to register your scanner. You have to this is where the catch is now, is that to read these cars, Chrysler, Jeep, um, Mazda. No, not Mazda. What's the other one? Mazda. There's one more. If your scanner is not up to date, they will not let you in. So a lot of guys are now stumbling across that because they get a Jeep in and they want to do something and it won't let them in because it's saying, "Hey, your scanner's not up to date." And
lots of
Lewis,
things you do.
Lewis, what kind of stuff are you looking for with the bus? Are you just looking to be able to clear codes or just check engine? What's a check engine light, stuff like that, basic.
Yeah, this run how you say it?
diagnostic.
Yeah. And if I want to do gauges, like they sell a unit that I can plug in to do digital gauges.
Yeah.
Right. I have seen a couple of the other owner operators that I know that have had some, and like Brian was saying, they're Chinesium, to anywhere from like 250 to 350. You can find the handheld, and it'll come with an interface to do a 9-pin or a 6-pin, or the one that I used the last time even had an OBD2 pin. But it was all basically just which pin do you need, the 9, like my International's a 6-pin, the Freightliner's a 9-pin. You just change your pin, plug it in, and then it'll let you do basic stuff. It'll let you look at, I think it would do like boost pressure, temperature, oil pressure, you could do basic stuff. And it even had a thing where you could do a screenshot or like a freeze frame where like trying to identify an issue. But again, you can get the real nice ones and spend thousands of dollars, and and it was kind of like, and it kind of all depends on what you're doing. It would, like I said, that one that I had or was borrowing, you could clear codes, you could look at ABS codes and potentially clear those, but that's it. You couldn't adjust idle speed, you couldn't adjust road speed, you couldn't adjust shift points, any of that. But you could look at basic stuff. Like with the last time I had talked to Cummins, and mine being an older Cummins, if you wanted to buy Insight, it was $13,000 a year. But if you bought that Cummins Insight, you could adjust road speed, you could adjust all the parameters, you could actually get in there. And like Brian was saying, you had to have an interface to go from the laptop, and then the interface went into your 6-pin or your 9-pin or whatever it is that the truck takes.
Yeah, so that's what the guy did in Florida. He had a computer,
you can spend a lot of money on the heavy duty stuff real quick. And if you're just needing to check codes and basic stuff, there are ways that you can do that for not a ton of money, and find the information that you're looking for. Like mine, we weren't sure what boost pressure was topping out at. Well, that little handheld had a function where we could run it up and see that the thing was making 32.7 pounds of boost. So, it all depends on what you're after. If you're just something cheapy, basic, they can be had.
Yeah. Like you said, that's the biggest problem. Somebody wants to buy, like Ray says, somebody wants to buy a scanner. They wanted to do it all, and there is no all. That's the only problem. And even a lot of my top shops have They usually have, I mean, most shops or top of the shops will have 5 different scanners because they could do almost everything. But they need the 5 different, because one guy is going to be better than the other guy on one thing, and one guy is going to be better on the other. They're not all inter thing. Now, like I carry a $99 scanner in the tool truck, and it does help me. Like I said, if I have a regen problem, I have to play around a little bit. I wish I had I wish I had the $8,000 scanner, because it would be a lot faster to go through, but I can play around with the small one. I can either clear the regen before it goes into lockup. Sometimes I can get it to force regen, but again, it's playing around with the scanner and doing it. And like I said, I could do it with a $99 scanner instead of spending all that money. And like I said, if I have a code or whatever, I can get it and then go to the next step, which is everybody's favorite. Be a YouTube mechanic, and you put in the code, it tells you and it shows you how to diagnose and fix it. But that's the only problem. I see guys spend a lot of money on a scanner. I've seen guys spend $10,000 on a scanner, and they're using it as a code reader. They have no idea the functions or what they can do with it.
Right.
But they had to make themselves look good, and
Yeah, had the best, biggest, and baddest.
Yeah, it's like the guy that, tells me I'm the baddest ass mechanic. I need the biggest toolbox in the world. And he spends $20,000 for a toolbox, and he keeps his dirty dishes from lunch and dirty clothes in the toolbox because he can't buy any tools.
So, Brian, what was it? I remember it's got to be about 10 years ago when scanners, when they first came out with the budget level line of scanners that people could buy, like the Ortels. What was the other one? There was another name. Anyway, because there was someone who called the show who, at the time, there was this. It was a device. You'd plug it into the OBD port, and you could use your phone, or they sold a display, and you could just have a gauge readout.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was something with a V, maybe. I don't remember the name of the. So that would just give you a full set of gauges. It would just read basic information through the OBD port, that stuff that was discernible, and it just gave you this set of gauges.
Yeah, that's what I want to do on the bus.
And you don't need a big, $800 scanner to do that.
They sell. I can't remember. I don't. There's tons of stuff because. Even with the hot rod stuff, they sell you download an app or whatever, and it has a thing that they plug in. You plug it in, and it's Bluetooth, and you have your gauges, or you have a screen on your thing. Yeah, that type of thing. I talk to a lot of guys every week about scanners, and unfortunately, they all want one scanner to do everything for $1.99.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's like I was saying before. Yeah, it's Keith,
and just like Lewis, like he's saying, he goes, "Well, I want this and this and that." Well, you're looking at three different things.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you. One of the things I bought. Actually, I had one of my kids got it for me for my birthday or Christmas one year, is a blue driver. And what it is, it's just a dongle that plugs into the OBD2 port, and use your phone or a tablet, and that becomes the scanner. And it actually does mode 6, which is pretty impressive. But, you can read codes, you can read freeze frame. It doesn't do bidirectional. You can do oil change resets with it. A lot of basic stuff in just a little package, and you can take it, you just keep it with you, use it on car to car. It doesn't give you a gauge set though, but that was one of the ones I always use because it actually gives me information. It'll generate a report. That's what it'll do. It'll generate a report and keep your history, whereas one of my other scanners doesn't do that. So I always use a combination of the, like I said, nobody ever uses just one thing.
Louis, check your phone
right now.
Yeah, there's some app I had that reads those
That's what I'm
Bluetooth
looking for, Keith.
dongles.
This is
Yeah,
the blue driver
what's it
screen.
called?
When you open it up,
Yeah.
these are the major things you can look at, which is, it's pretty cool. It gives you a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's even mode 6 on there, which is a lot of scanners I know don't give you mode 6, especially
All right, dumb question. What is mode 6?
Aha! You got to talk to Joe about that. That was one of his favorite diagnostic modes. It's just another level. I used to have a really good answer for this because people used to ask me, and I would give them the answer all the time. And it's been a couple of years since I had to do it. So Brian, you may be able to.
Well, I'm not really good at this, but it's just the different levels of
Right.
improvements over the years. When it's kind of like when we first had OBD1, and then we went to OBD2, and then they improved or built up, and you had, it's very similar like Android about the cloud systems, when they build up to cloud 14 now or whatever. It's just improvements.
I found it online here. Mode 6 is one of the 9 diagnostic modes that's part of OBD2. Originally created, it was not designed for use by technicians. It was supposed to be hidden data used by the OBD2 system. And Jim, that's how Joe knew about it. He used to talk about mode 6. I'd say, what the hell is mode 6? Oh, well, I used it on this Ford, and I used it. Like, what the hell? Where do you find it? He goes, oh, well, it's hidden. I was like, oh, well, shit. So now it became, it's out there now. And this article goes on to say that a lot of older scanners don't have it and whatever. So it is, okay, here we go. Mode 6 is often the key to resolving issues such as no code drivability and emissions faults, identifying sensors and other components that are still operating within acceptable limits but are on the verge of failure. Joe always used to talk about stuff that was on the edge, on the parameter, or he'd say on the spectrum. He was, and he'd say, yeah, I use mode 6 to find it, because he'd actually look at the code language. Fucking guy. Reducing comebacks involve catalytic converters, evap systems, and engine misfires. So it's just, let's just suffice to say it's a Joe level diagnostic. So
do you remember what I texted to Chris on Sunday?
No, because you texted it to him, not me.
Yeah, Joe knows everything.
Oh yeah, so I played the sounder, right? What does Joe know? Yeah, exactly. No, it's true. Joe had that ability with diagnostics. We would talk about this all the time. I would ask him about why is this car like this or that car like that. Why is it tripping codes? And he knew the differences in the manufacturers at what level codes would trip. He kind of knew the back end of it, what parameters were built into the software. And he retained it. He was just a genius that way. It was amazing. I mean, we would talk about it all the time, and I'd say, boy, I hope I can remember a tenth of this, and I obviously don't. So,
well, that's like you said, some guys know it. Some guys stumble. I stumble my way through the stuff.
The other thing too, Brian, is the other part of the story is Joe worked with Standard Motors. So part of his thing, I mean, he did a little bit of everything. It's Standard, but I mean, he used to run the tech line, which in itself answers a lot of questions right there. But he also worked in the R&D area in the lab where they would take sensors and take some of their components, like we did when I worked at Leviton, test them to failure, and then diagnose and see why they failed, how they failed, what the parameters were when they failed. Was it heat? Was it a voltage thing? Was it, frequency? So he got to see a lot of that stuff, and that's what just gave him that broader language. And it was phenomenal. You had to hear him talk. It was a thing of wonder.
So Vince,
and like I said, usually most guys complicate things so far or so much instead of just looking at the three basic starts of everything, and that is connections, grounds, and if you gotta check your, you got to understand if it's got a 5-volt reference or whatever, but a lot of guys jump over and they just go right to the computer.
Well, that was the
or
other thing.
right to the sensor.
Joe always said, he goes, I'm going to make the damn T-shirt. And he was going to say, what part of a bad ground don't you understand? And I tell you, I can't tell you how many problems I've solved and found that were related to grounds. More than I ever thought were possible. Grounding is just,
we had a guy that had a problem with chasing an alternator around on his truck. And I said, well, did you check the cables? Look at the ground. Look at the cables real good. Yeah, they look great. They look great. Yeah. I said, no. You need to actually take your pocket knife out and split the casing and look. Oh, why? It looks good. They feel good. They look good. I said, please, you've spent all day doing this. You've lost all day, and you're bugging everybody else.
Yeah.
And so he takes his knife out, split, and it was completely corroded inside.
Yeah.
And he's like, wow, this is bad. It looks great. And I said, this is checking this, just because it looks, or just because, it's tight connection, you have to kind of poke around a little bit. And
to that point, I've had wires that looked great also, and that there was a loose connection.
Yeah.
And all you had to do was wiggle it. I mean, Ford has what they call the wiggle test. They do it for that reason, but it's for connectivity. And between loose, corroded grounds or cables, and that's why I went so overboard on my own car. I mean, the whole freaking car is a ground plane.
Oh, I seen that.
Yeah, the Christian store. There's like everything is grounded to everything else, and it all comes back to the battery. So
I thought he had tethers going to his control arms, and I'm like, oh wait, that's just a shunt wire going to the ball joint, connecting the hip bone to the neck bone to this bone.
It's important to have grounds and ball joints. So Christian, we were talking about Lewis's motorcycle and scanning it and getting into the computer.
Oh,
so we need to know what you do and what you use, what's available for today's motorcycles.
Okay. That's a very so motorcycles don't have OBD2 style ports except for Triumph. Actually, Triumph motorcycles do have a regular world style what is that, worldwide OBD2 right? And you can plug a regular scanner in there and pull codes out. So with the motorcycles, usually there's a process for a dealer, and then there's a process for someone who's not a dealer. And the process of, if you're not a dealer, is usually pressing and holding mode buttons on the Speedo, and then the temperature gauge on your Speedo will pull up codes as that route, just to check for any kind of faults that are actually, if anything, if there's something that's open, it's going to show up on there. If you're having something where you want to go in and check live parameters and all that stuff, then you have to go through the CAN line, and that's not available to the public for the bikes yet.
And the funny thing is, what you're describing is what we had to do back in the 80s with a paper clip in the OBD2 connector and check engine lights.
Waiting for the flashy light.
Here's a CAN code. This is 10-pin code for BMW for motorcycles.
BMW motorcycles, yeah.
What's the range of application on that? Because my BMW, I'd love to be able to get into that thing.
Well, what are you trying to do, Ray? Because if you're trying to modify anything, you don't have a license to do that. See, that's why you get like a Woolwich flash tune, and like Woolwich, you allocate the license to the motorcycle through the CAN line, and then you could actually go in and map it and all that stuff. But you have to go through a company to buy the flash, and then marry the flash to the bike with a license, right? That license is can be encrypted, so you could lock it so the next guy can't go in there, and you could encrypt it to your own.
Well, I'll tell you what I want
to do. This is a code reader. This is a 10 10 pin to 16 pin OBD2. So
Yeah, that's like that's a dongle. Yeah, that's just a dongle.
Right, and basically this will go in and you can read your codes. This is, again, like I said, unless you have a subscription or if you're buying if you wanted to reflash a BMW, you go to the BMW website that they have, you put in the VIN number, you put in the information, and they will usually call you back because they want to make sure you have a maintainer or a battery saver, because a BMW can take up to 24 hours to program.
Well,
Yeah.
So
this maybe will be moot. The thing that I want to know was, does that tell you what the year range is?
it doesn't say. I have to go deeper. This is just on our. This is on our app. Isn't.
I do have a couple of weird connectors that go nowhere, but I don't think my bike is plug-inable. The problem is I had a drivability issue with the bike, where I'd be cruising along at any given speed, steady throttle, and it was like somebody just cut the ignition off, but the bike continued to run. It would still be running at 60 miles an hour, but I had no throttle control.
Wow.
And I was going nuts.
Yeah,
And then I found, just by accident, I hit a bump, and boom, because I had the throttle like cranked all the way, hit a bump, and the fucking bike took off. I never found it definitively to say that I fixed it. So I just thought I kept thinking it was connections. And it was really just one big connector on the ECU.
Yeah, the motorcycle world is not in alignment with the car world.
No, not at all. Not at all. So I kind of lost faith in the bike, which was...
A lot of people do. And there's also a lot of dealers that they're not knowledgeable. Even the Harley Davidsons were pretty bad with their setup too, as far as the mode, just if you weren't a dealer.
Right.
But Harley Davidson got in so much trouble with their race tuner that now they went through and they cleaned everybody out as far as race tuners for Harley, Dyno Jet, right? So Dyno Jet was the power commanders, which will allow you to just plug and play. So that piggyback. So the piggyback stuff works because you can tune that, but they took you down from making 50% adjustment down to 15 now, because they've been just pulling all that regulation down on the motorcycle guys. So it's really, I mean, hopefully that'll unwind. I don't know how long it's going to take, but we got out of dyno tuning bikes for that reason, because we lost a lot of too much time in the dyno room to tune a bike with these flash tunes and all the different brands. And then I look like a spaghetti monster in there with the bike on the dyno, and I'm like, oh wait, what am I working on today? It was just too much, and you're 6-7 hours trying to tune a motorcycle for drivability.
Wow, yeah.
Oh God.
So in the motorcycle world, it's got
now put a lead in there.
See, that's the motorcycle pack right there. It comes with two Harley ones, Kawasaki, Suzuki, Yamaha, Honda.
Yeah, that'll work for Lou's bike though, because he could at least read codes on it,
Yeah, but like I said, once there's a threshold, or there's a part of going in, unless you buy a subscription or you're buying their system, they're not going to let you change anything. And on top of that, like I said, tuner, I mean, it's like the trucks for our big trucks. They have companies outside of the United States that I can send, and they can flash and do everything and change the emissions on the truck. That's all fine and dandy until the guy comes, when you get pulled over and the guy plugs into your port and realizes you're missing the shit. So,
well, that's just ridiculous.
I mean, that's like the same thing. We had the same problem with when I was at Porsche. They had the motorsport division, and we were putting off-road exhaust, and we were doing all kinds of stuff. And they were like, "Wait a minute, now this isn't, off-road." That's like when I bought my 6.0 for the Ford. The what was it? The the EGR Delete kit. The guy, I bought it from some, The guy's like, "You're not in California, are you?"
Yeah.
That was the
Oh, that's
question.
a whole-
Oh no, you know, and
Yeah, that's a whole nother.
because
You get it. Yeah.
that's when you get into emissions, but that's that's the problem that they're that's again, this is the whole problem is there's a part about reading and fixing, and then there's a part about going in and retuning and redoing, and that's
Yeah.
the fine line.
There's
But
a couple guys with the same bike that I have that I guess they bought some kind of tuners like $300 or $400 to give them a little more power and a little more stuff.
Well,
So
drivability.
let's see here on a Mac. So even like on a motorcycle, if you bought you could buy your one cable. You don't have to buy the whole set. You could buy your cable, and let's see here. They will say it will work with a Max Flex.
It's
Max Flex. They also say Max Light, but I would double check because a Max Light is only $1,200, and you're paying for the subscription. When you want it, you're paying for the $22 a month. And some guys like that because you're not using a scanner every day. All you're doing is resetting a code or finding out what the code is. You don't need that bi-directional talk, or you don't want to get in. When you do need it, you pay the $22. But most likely, it says Max Flex, so you're looking at like basically $3,000 and your cable, and that's where you're in. And you can do quite a bit of stuff. You get yourself in trouble.
for Ducati, you got to double it and add 20 because they're even worse, But the ECUs now versus like ECUs I dealt with back when they still had a motherboard with a chip in it, and you used to pull that rubber plug out of the back of the ECU, and you just take a chip out. And how much was a chip, resource-wise? 35 cents. You could throw it away, burn a new one, and put it right back in, and every problems were solved. And that was the fun days because with Ducati had the Morellis, the Magneti Morelli system, which used a chip. And I used to sit. I did a lot of training with Faraci. I don't know if you know Fast by Faraci, but he would sit in his office on his laptop and burn new chips, and we'd go in the dyno room and map and take that map and then put it into the chip and take the chip out, put the new chip in, run the bike. That was so analog to us, but yet that worked the best. Because it was just.
I actually remember working with a chip burner when I was at Levitt, and we had one, and it was, proprietary stuff. But you'd write the code, and then you would just burn the chip, and there you go. You'd plop it in your device, and you test it, and if it didn't work, you go back, you do it again.
Did I tell you about the Game Boy? Did I tell you guys about the Game Boy?
Christian, that's one of the best stories you've ever told.
Did these guys hear about the Game Boy?
No, you got to tell the story. Go on.
So I worked for a multi-franchise dealership. So we had Kawasaki, Suzuki, Polaris, and we didn't have Yamaha because they were down the block, and Honda was down the block. So we couldn't have those franchises. So we were really trying to suck up a lot of franchises. So we picked up Aprilia. Aprilia is an Italian company, and they specialized in scooters and motorcycle and a lot of racing. So they had a good line of bikes in Italy that were for everything from like two-stroke 250cc street legal race bikes that you could ride on the street that you couldn't have here, to these RSV 1000 V-twin 60-degree V-twins way before the V-Rod was even a thing with the V-twin 60-degree. The Porsche developed, whatever. Anyway, long story short, they had the scooters. And the scooters from Italy, when we first started getting them in 1999, they were carbureted and they were restricted. So a scooter that would come into the United States from Italy had to get detuned with a restrictor in the clutch and an airbox restrictor to choke down the air intake. So a couple years later, they came out with a new design. They came out with a two-stroke. Now, this is a 50cc scooter with a fuel-injected Dytech two-stroke engine, which was kind of derived from how they started doing the direct injection for the marine engines for like outboards. So what it was is it had a injector directly into the top of the cylinder head that would inject the fuel right into the chamber, and that's through the lower end. And the intake was just a throttle body, but with no fuel to it. It just let the air come in through the bottom, up through the transfer ports, and mix with that fuel charge up in the top through the direct injection. In order for that to work, it had to have an air compressor. And the best way they did is they took one of the lobes of the crankshaft, and it was like a camshaft on the end of the flywheel, and they had an air pump that worked off of that. So they backed up the fuel with air pressure. So you had a high pressure air line and a fuel line coming in, direct injecting to the chamber. The reason why they did this is so that they could burn way less fuel and burn hardly no oil. So it was still oil injected, but you burned and used almost 80% less oil in a two-stroke, mind you. Okay. Here's the thing. It was fuel injected technically. So now you can imagine, now you have a scooter that's fuel injected coming in from Italy, and you have to homologate it to 2 horsepower so that you could sell it here in the United States. That was the only way we can import them in, is they had to be homologated to 2 horsepower. So Aprilia knew that, okay, it's not carbureted anymore, so we have to be able to give the dealer a way to unrestrict that technically and do it in a way electronically through, but they were pretty smart, and they didn't really they didn't want to invest into making a scan tool that was $3,000. So
it's going to be great.
The best way they came up with is, I got all these new units in, and I'm like, great, these things are 2 horsepower. How am I going to unhomologate this stupid thing? Now, they still put a washer in the clutch to restrict the pulleys on the clutch so that it didn't have a full ratio. So the thing would just go down the road, and probably you get run over here in New York. Forget it. The people would run you right over on Sunrise Highway because you couldn't go over 40 miles an hour. These things should be doing 65 miles an hour easy. So Aprilia had this genius way of doing it. And what they did is they used the Game Boy Color, which is something that we could purchase here in the United States at a local game store. And what they did is they had a cartridge that went into the Game Boy that had the dongle, and inside the handlebar there was a panel, and you pulled the can line out and you plugged it into the scooter, and the Game Boy screen, when you plugged the cartridge in, became your scanner. Now you could go in and pull diagnostics. We could change fuel mapping. We could do live data reading and everything through a Game Boy Color. I still have it. I had to be at home today. If I was at the shop right now, I'd dig it out and show you.
The thing is, can you imagine being the shop with these bikes, and you call in the expert, and he comes in and it's like, don't worry, dude, I'm going to charge only $500 an hour to do this because your problems will be solved. And the guy takes a bag out, puts his professor hat on, and takes out a freaking Game Boy console and goes to play.
I'll add to this.
You want to kick him the fuck out on his head.
But this is what I did now. I use this in my favor. You know how I operate. So
yes.
This is what the guy would buy a scooter. You send him on his way. You prep it. The guy would go down the block or whatever. You come back a day later, and he'd be like, okay, I heard you could unrestrict this thing. Holy cow, this thing's so slow. Yeah, we're not really allowed to, but hey, come on, I'll take care of it. So I would bring the scooter into the shop. I'd leave the doors open. I'd pull the clutch cover off, and I would take the clutch apart to pull that washer out. And then I would put the cover back on, and I say, here you go, try that. Ride down the road and let me see what happens. Let me know and come back. So by pulling the washer out of the clutch, that allowed him to go from like 40 miles an hour to like 55. But it just didn't have the power. It was still 2 horsepower. So then the guy would come back, and he would have his helmet on still and everything. And the guy would be like, it's still, I said, oh, wait a second. Oh, you know what? Hold on. And I would leave the scooter out on the sidewalk, and I would be like, I'll be right back. And I would run into the shop, and that's when I would come out with the Game Boy. And then I would take 2 Allen screws, and I would pull the cover off, pull the wire out. Now the guy's watching me. He's over my shoulder. So I would let people witness this. So I plug, the guy would look at me like, "What are you doing?" I had the Game Boy. I turned the Game Boy on, and he'd think I'd be, I'm ready to play Donkey Kong, and I would plug in the Aprilia cartridge, and then all of a sudden the Aprilia icon comes up on the screen, and I just start punching numbers or whatever, and there was like 3 or 4 fuel maps, and I'd be like, "All right, yeah, hold on a second. Yeah, try this." Boom, download, unplug the thing, put the 2 things back on. The guy would hop on it like what did he just do? And then I would say, "Hey, come back and let me know," and I would just walk away. That guy would be right back. "Oh my God, what did you do? Here's a 20. Go buy yourself some lunch, man. I can't believe it." He would go tell all his friends, and all these other scooters started showing up, and they're like, "Hey, I hear you got a Game Boy. You can make some power with my scooter, man. Like, come on, I had so much fun with it, guys.
Yeah,
I'm telling you.
That's
But
that's like the old the old game is like hear the little running, they're running along.
Aprilia was really smart. They didn't need to make a $5,000 scanner.
Right.
They used the Game Boy as that platform.
Hey,
Well, the whole reason why that was all before
Donkey Kong
corporate
sent me.
greed. That was all before corporate greed. That's the reason why that was like that.
They were very good. The Italians were very good. The only problems that we had were like, in August, you had to make sure you had to order your parts before August because they totally shut down in Italy to pick their grapes, So, and we're racing these 250s and we needed crankshafts and we're blowing stuff up. And it's like, oh my God, we got to, but even with the Italians, when they made the 250, they made the lower end of the engine in Italy through Rotax, which is an Austrian casting, and they would use Suzuki top end on it. So like their engines were like half Suzuki and half Italian. It was crazy. I loved it. It was probably some of the most exotic stuff I worked on back then, and it was fun for that reason, And the company's still around. I mean, they're still racing Aprilias to this day.
Yeah.
I mean, in the racing world, there is some new things happening though for us. The Aprilias are still strong, and Kramer's the new bike now for the young kids to be racing, and it's not really an entry level. But Kramer is a company out of I forget now, but they're located in Wyoming, believe it or not. Oh no, North Dakota. Sorry, North Dakota. And they open a class up where they have all just Kramers, so all the bikes are identical. So it's a talent cup series that they're running right now, and the bikes are basically have a KTM engine in it and everything. It's a 390cc. They're not the fastest things, but the last race they were railing pretty good. It was the debut race last week, and for someone to go involved with racing and stuff to buy a $20,000 race bike, that's the only bike that you can buy to run in that class. Where the smaller other Kawasaki's that were cheaper mixed with Yamahas, it was a little bit more affordable. So we're just, seeing how this new class is going to go. But there's some new motorcycles coming into the world now, which is cool. So I hope the United States catches up to that because we really have to. It's pretty bad that we're not. I can't believe the United States doesn't have anything motorcycle wise that's entry level stuff for people to race or buy and do stuff with. Because even Lou's Yamaha, he's that bike is probably got a big following. So any information you need in forums and all that stuff, there's probably a lot of help and stuff like that, which is good.
Not really.
No?
It's like they made that bike came out in 18. I think they made it for 2 years, but it's the Venture, which they're still making the Venture.
Right. And the Fury was the equivalent. The Honda Fury, was that like kind of like the similar bike? Yeah.
Right. But I could hardly find any videos or anything on the bike but reviews. Like a whole bunch of reviews, but no like aftermarket, and it's kind of weird.
Yeah, I can't really, what it is like that's the same thing like when Harley Davidson dropped the V-Rod line, but everyone still has all these V-Rods on the road, and now there's going to be no support. And then the same thing with the Victories. You saw how the Victories came up, and then boom, the bottom fell out on that. The motorcycle world is still pretty vulnerable to markets and all that stuff. Whereas obviously the car market, it's vulnerable, but it could adjust quicker. So it's been tough, but we stand behind. I stand behind the racing part of it because it's really that's where I see what's going on manufacturer wise, and we need some more American stuff. We have it with the bagger racing and stuff like that, but I'm worried about Harley Davidson in that sense because I think they need to do something to make dirt bikes again, for Christ's sake, right? Ray? I mean, come on.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing though. Harley is such a it's like there's other brands that are just like that. They're so ensconced in the fabric of Americana. And guys are actually, they're buying the bikes. I mean, you see them on the road, brand new bikes all day.
Yep.
They're fucking stupidly priced.
Yep.
And now I'm sure with the tariffs, better than anybody where a lot of their parts come from. They're going to go up. And just like BMWs, the cars, people are going to buy them. They want to have that badge between their legs, and they're going to pay for it. They don't care.
We were pitted next to Keanu Reeves at the Daytona 200. And he launched, his Arch motorcycle to race in the Hooligan series. So that's an American company. That's his own company that he's manufacturing those bikes. So kudos to Keanu for doing that. And he's really hyped about it. And hopefully maybe soon the bikes will go into a production, where it could be one of those new American motorcycles that'll be out there.
But even so, what kind of dealer network is it going to have? I mean, to branch out where they can actually have a shot at taking a chip at Harley, it's billions of dollars that needs to be invested, and a small company isn't going to have that.
But so I saw the Long Island Street Rod has a display at the car show this weekend at Javits.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Oh shit, that's cool.
So, I didn't realize that either, and I'm a member of the Long Island. Go figure.
I know. I just saw Vic today too. He was out on the street.
So a couple of the guys are there. The Long Island. I guess this is the International Car Show.
It's the International Auto Show at the Javits Center, right?
So they came out with a new Chevelle. There's a new Chevelle out. It's there.
There's stuff I've been seeing online, and I think it's all kind of made up stuff. I saw something about a Chevelle a while ago. It's
a Camaro.
It's not through Chevy. There's a company in Florida that was taking, like a few years ago, they were taking Camaros and turning them into Trans Ams.
Trans Am specialist or something like that.
Yeah. And they were doing a GTO too. They did a Judge, but it wasn't. It's not GM doing it.
Right.
It looked pretty cool. It's a good, nice idea.
It looked like a 70.
Yeah, that's the one, right?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah,
we talk to the guy out of SEMA every year. They're coming out with the convertibles now this year.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm hoping the American market. I mean, if everything's going to start to really do good with, things balancing out after obviously the throwdown that we've been going through with tariffs and everything. Orient Express is feeling it with K-Tech suspension. We get a lot of resource, from all our stuff comes from the UK, but then they're resourcing from all over the place too, even China itself. So, certain components of what we use has been up 10%.
But you think about the dealer network, Kirsch. I mean, Harley always was a standalone. I mean, they used to play around a little bit back in the day, but we had places like Honda Mineola, and when we had
Freeport alone was a mecca of motorcycle dealers.
I was just trying to think of the name where you worked at.
We had Orient Express was a dealership, and then it was Extreme.
Yeah, Extreme Motorsports.
Yeah. We had 7 to 8 franchises out of that building.
I mean, it was a motorcycle superstore. So if you didn't know what you wanted, you could look at 7 different brands. I mean, I used to go in there. That was one of my go-to place to look for helmets because they always had the full line of.
We were serious about that, yeah.
Yeah, and if you need gear.
We sold a motorcycle to a young guy. We waived a PRAPE and freight, the fees that they tack onto when you buy a motorcycle. We didn't charge that.
Really?
We sold our bikes because our bikes were in our warehouse on a floor plan. So we needed to unload as many motorcycles as we could, or else we were paying for that floor plan every month. So we let bikes go at cost.
Wow.
What we did is we made sure that they went downstairs in our parts department and bought a leather, the helmet,
Right.
the boots, everything.
Made the money there.
And that's where we made the money. And then we gave them the saucer of milk, the Game Boy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the guys went out there and rode safe, and they felt confident. And then when they got confident, they come back and spend more money because now they want the pipe and they want the
Right.
paracaster or the jet pit, you know. So we were the only dealership that wasn't charging that freight and prep and all that baloney. Like we gave the people the wiggle room to make sure that they had a leather at least, you know.
Yeah.
And good leather, right, and good helmets.
Oh yeah, shot. You know, a lot of shot stuff, and and good. All the full line helmet. I sent so many people there, and actually, Honda Freeport was another one that had a ton of helmets.
Well, yeah, because he was cuckoo anyway. But he was he had a whole nother business inside that business that you never saw.
Exactly.
People, you ever heard about the red door in that place?
Yes.
Okay, that was
I
where
bought
all
my
the.
wife a new helmet.
But places like that have they're gone. You know, there's no one around anymore like that.
You know, because we all became vulnerable at a certain time, around 2004, is when Freddie Ippolito came in and he bought out all the dealerships in the whole Sunrise Highway section there. And he just wiped everybody out because he tried to take it all and put it all into one place in Massapequa. And then ultimately what they did is they were doing this weird routine where you got cattle herded in to buy a motorcycle, and then you went out the back door with a bike, and you also had to pay another fee and another fee, and then you're
him and John Staluppi. That was the other
one. Yeah, no, and Whitey and all of them.
Whitey. And I was just by New York Motorcycle the other day. It's still there.
Yeah.
You know, but Staluppi had said at one point, he says at some point in time, if you buy a car on Long Island, it's going to come from me. One way or another. Yeah. And there's only a very few dealerships he doesn't.
Is that a bell? What is that?
That's a bell. That's nice.
Wait, whoa.
I like that design. Nice. Very cool.
I like that. That's cool. And you know what? All my helmets.
So visor goes in.
I show off my helmets.
Nice. That's cool.
So I have the same helmet, but all in black.
That's really cool.
And the front.
I have a bell that flips up. Does that whole piece flip up?
No, you got the visor that flips up, but then the front comes off. Wait a minute.
Oh, so then it's not a full face, an open face.
Yeah, so you can roll it like that too.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah, there's I mean, motorcycle gear and all that stuff. To have a dealership, to have everything like we had, it's impossible right now because there's too many other companies selling, and they have all the online sales and all that stuff. So like I can only imagine what the car world's like too. I mean, I don't know.
You know what you're talking about.
There you go. Oh man,
it's gonna be Ray Fix.
It also came with a clear shield too.
Oh, look at that.
So how do you change that shield? Is it easy?
Yeah, it just pops straight out.
This is what you're talking about. This is the flip up.
Yeah, I got one of those too.
Okay.
On a bike with a windshield, you just ride with it up. Only in the coldest of weather do you ever have to go down, and it also has a separate sun visor.
Hey, I got the ultimate helmet right here, okay? Because I'm within reach. I finally have it. I have a helmet to show you guys. There you go.
Nice.
What's up? You know, I'm up in my upstairs here, so I got all my doodads up here. I'm not at the shops.
My friend Cliff actually bought
collect the weirdest stuff, right?
My friend Cliff bought a dune buggy it was a Shriner's dune buggy. It was all set up for parade use, like through the 70s. It was pretty cool.
I think this is New York City, the Cantors, because we have Shriners in Long Island, right?
Yeah. There was a big
Aleppo.
Island.
Aleppo. Isn't that a pepper?
I think something like that, yeah.
It even I know, I got the weirdest stuff. I even got the hat box it comes in.
That is wild.
Nice.
Yeah, the hat box.
Pretty cool.
Well, listen, don't make me go get my dosimeter out.
Listen, don't get, and that, you know, that's in the basement. Don't let me.
Mine's right next door.
Hey, does anybody?
These guys don't know what I do with that, I guess, huh?
No, they don't.
Oh, Jesus.
Can you say thorium?
Yeah.
Is anybody here a member of the Elks?
Yeah, my grandfather was elk of the year out of actually over in over in Long there, New Hyde Park.
Huh.
Yeah, my grandfather
Yeah,
was
I
an
need
elk.
to join because
Camping.
a lot of schoolies, they park in their parking lots.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, my son was Boy Scouts and was at the Elks Lodge.
Yep.
And every winter, the field would be full of all campers hanging out there. They stay there for winter and go back. Snowbirds.
Yeah.
All right, guys, time for me to bail. I gotta go.
All right,
See
Jim.
you, Jim.
All right,
See you
Jim.
next
Hey,
week.
guys.
Take it easy.
Take it easy.
What are the qualifications to be an elk?
I don't
I
know.
think you have to be old.
I'll
That-
cover that.
I think we're all of it. We can all join.
I think anyone can join. Even the women have their own. Because I'm in the Odd Fellows, so I've been in the Odd Fellows for I don't know, a long time, and we have what they call the Rebeccas, the women of the Rebeccas. But my lodge closed up. My lodge was in Mineola, and then now it's in East Meadow, and it's a smaller place, But the Odd Fellows has been around a very long time.
Yeah.
And I haven't really been to meetings lately, but it is definitely hard for people to get, into being social like that these days. I guess everyone's so connected. People should disconnect and go meet up with other people at a lodge.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you say the Elks, I recommend it. You hang out with a bunch of dudes, and the women. It's definitely a separation between women and men. It's pretty funny. But then you had the men's and ladies things, but it could be just the guys hanging out, which is like what we're doing right now, I guess. This is another lodge.
Even the fire department's like that. They had the ladies auxiliary.
Yeah.
Fire department,
Yeah, I've been in that world too. That's a whole other lifestyle. Yeah.
Sure. You know all about that, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right. Let me show you this stuff so I can put it away. You're talking about doing ECMs and everything like that. So this was ODB1 programmer.
Oh, yeah, that's
put
a
your
chip
chip
burner.
in it.
Yeah.
Chip burner.
Exactly.
Chip burner, yep.
So then I had these chips. I guess these were
Yeah,
just
you
regular EPROMs, right?
Yeah, regular EPROMs, yep.
Yep. And then I graduated to the EEPROM.
Yep.
Right? You could erase it. Got the eraser.
What about the double decker? Did you have a double decker one where it's like a motherboard that goes into the EPROM port and then the EPROM goes into that?
No, you know what So I used to. So I would tune GMC Cyclones and Typhoons. Not just little stuff, not anything crazy. But I got this. I don't remember what the heck I used this. This is probably another programmer. I probably went from that big one to this. This just has a USB thing on it. Then I went and I got this and emulator.
Oh, geez.
So you just take this, hook this up to my computer.
Yep.
And as we're driving, let me change this. And
yeah,
this worked really well, except we were at the track. I remember I was at the track with my friend, and it was running fine. And there must have been some kind of interference. Right when we're getting up to the line, it cut off. His whole truck cut off. I'm like, what the heck? Like, I'm messing around. It just died. And I'm messing around. I go, all right, try it now. And we got it going. And there must have been, who knows what. There was something that was killing it. It would kill the connection.
It was corrupt.
And then no, because then once we got away from the track lights and all that kind of stuff, it was fine. We took it on the road, and I'm like, what the? It's working fine. So
a PA system from the tower.
Something, yeah.
Well, you can have an RF interference that'll do that for sure.
Yeah, that's probably what it was.
I was just talking about on Sunday the interference I'm getting off my LED lights, and I bought those ceramic core ferrites, and I did a little more. Who was it? My buddy Paul, Pirate Paul. He had sent me a text and said, "Yeah, good luck." He says, when you got cheap lights, which I still don't understand with the LEDs. I could see if they were any other gas, then it's an LED chip. But he was right. They do cause the interference. So the radio I have in the basement here was the first one I played with. I did a little more research, and they said the first thing you got to do is just move the antenna. you just if you move the antenna and it gets even a little better, you're in the right path. Get that antenna. So I literally took the dipole off my rafters in the basement. I just moved it, a hand arm's length away. Interference was gone. I said, okay, that one's fixed. So now out in the garage, I'll play with the ferrites and see what's going on. But yeah, there's EMF and RFI, all sorts of crazy places.
Well, Suzuki put a safety bulletin out many years ago for the M109 Suzuki, which is a V-twin cruiser, and they were having an issue with the speedo just whacking out on it. It would just go all crazy. And I get this bulletin, and I'm like, okay, and I'm like, what's the deal with this, And they were like, oh yeah, this little red wire with the white tracer on it. Pull it out of the harness and move it around to the opposite side of the frame. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
They did that, problem solved. So it was just an RF signal that was affecting the the speedos don't operate off of cables anymore. It's just they actually use a sensor. Let's go to Harley. Okay. I'll get on to Harley about this ridiculous deal. Same thing. So all the speed sensors now on motorcycles pick up off the transmission gears. And what they have is a sensor that just sits down on top, and it'll read a transmission gear and then tells the speedo how fast you're going. That's all great until Christian gets in there and starts modifying the ratios, and then you might as well kiss that speedo goodbye. But I've done that with the Harleys, to the point where it's like it throws the whole calibration out, because I used to do a lot of Andrews gear swaps to modify the ratios in Sportsters and stuff.
Right.
And I've had Sportsters go 143 at the El Mirage Lake.
Wow.
So, with those modified ratios, you could get.
But they didn't know it because the speedo didn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was just we would do GPS and stuff at that point. But
I was gonna say, now you can just do GPS. It's easier, cheaper.
Harley Davidson recently had a problem. So what they ran into is a similar thing like that Suzuki. The speedo would whack out on the thing, and what they were finding is that the metal shavings were getting stuck to the sensor.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Did
you see the Harley Davidson fix for that?
No, I didn't. Really didn't.
Air hose.
You gotta hear this. It's
shrouded.
The drain plug. They modified a drain plug, and it has a 6-inch rod with a magnet at the top, so that they in hopes that the metal will get stuck to the drain plug magnet and not to the sensor.
Wow.
What?
So they got this thing. You pull the drain plug, and it's like a 6-inch with the magnet. I don't know. It's just.
I was gonna say, I've seen plenty of wheel sensors that were whacked out.
I see Brian Reddy over there. He's going like, I'll tell you what, Volkswagen back in the day.
Yeah.
They had the same problem because they would put a magnet in the transmission pan. They would put a magnet. The first person who would do a trans service, they take the magnet out.
Yes.
They're like, hey, what the hell is this in here? And the next thing you know, that you had all kinds of problems, and all the stuff would get stuck to the sensor.
Yep.
And then once again, it's you read a code, and the person would change it, and they say, oh, okay, it's fixed. And of course, 2 weeks later, all the other magnet, more stuff, what's going on? Again, just because the scanner says this is the problem doesn't mean that's the problem.
Right.
You have to look at it. But we used to, that was a constant. I always loved when you had that new guy that in the dealership, and you go by his cart and he'd have about 18 magnets sitting there because for some reason he decided to take them out. And you're like, dude, there's a reason why they're in there.
Ray's got about 30 shunt wires on the GTO. Okay, so
I do, yeah.
And I'm sure the electrolysis of your engine block, you probably got the cleanest engine block on the planet.
I will tell you what I did when Bill Carberry, when I had him redo my radiator, I had him put a zinc anode in the lower tank, because you get dissimilar metals when you have aluminum and cast, and the car sits, and the coolant conducts. So I had him put a zinc anode in. Now it's been in the car like 6 years, 7 years. Last summer, I pulled it out, and smartly when I got it, I took a picture of it against the scale so I could see exactly how long it was. And then I measured it again. It hasn't lost a millimeter.
Of
It's
course
like
not.
no loss, because you know why? There's no ground loss.
Yeah. Ray's car's got ground scraping the ground as he's driving. He's got little
He's got those
feelers
things
out
on the
there.
back.
You know, those are there, the black neoprene
Like-
straps. I don't need them.
I'm like underneath the car. I'm like, is the rear end tethered in here? What is that cable? I'm like, what is all this stuff? And I'm like, oh my god, there's shunt wires everywhere. And at Central Scrap and Islip, there's a 55-gallon drum full of shunt wires. And
Wow!
I took a picture and I said, oh, I don't know, Ray want to.
I want to take the whole damn barrel.
All different sizes, everything.
Yeah.
But I
I
mean,
buy the ones from Standard. They make the braided cables. And they're not expensive.
Hey, I got a question. Now we're talking about grounds. So in my solar equipment, I have to run a ground from my batteries to the frame, and it's also connected to my fuse box. Can I use what do you call it? Copper wire?
Copper wire is always the best for conducting.
yeah.
No, I mean, does it have to be like the one you use in your house, like the
solid copper?
Yeah, solid copper, like
What
that.
are you gonna do again with it? What are you gonna?
Is this for the bus?
Yeah.
Oh, so he's talking about the solar equipment on the bus.
Is
Yeah.
it for your AC? Oh no, it's gonna be grounded.
No, well, it's going to ground my batteries and my fuse
So
box.
it's DC.
You can use solid. The only problem with solid is it doesn't flex. And
Yeah, we use.
I wouldn't use it.
you know that's why
You get more of a mass. You get a bigger. I mean, the braided wire. I mean, the strands of wire on the sides. You have a better contact than a single.
not to get into
Okay.
calculus, but the way you can calculate that, and the way you do it is you take actually each strand of wire, and it gets cut on a diagonal, and you measure the area of the diagonal, and you got to use calculus to do it, but you can calculate each, and then you add each strand, and you can find out the total. This is like to the pinpoint nth degree of resistance.
That's like back in the day when you put your audio system in the car and you bought the higher end speaker wire,
Correct.
cable, because it was more strands
Okay.
per size.
I have something. I got to talk to an audio engineer because I've always done that. I use monster cable, and I always did. I always believed the bigger cable with the more strands. And then, just as a side note, Christian, years ago, when I was rebuilding the Super Glide, I remember at Rolling Thunder, they had a Sportster ground cable, because the Sportster ground cables had to make like an S bend on,
Yeah, it's a
on the
shunt
iron
wire.
axle.
Yeah.
And they would always they would break, and you'd lose ground and the bike would die. So Gerard had bought these ground cables. Literally, you take them and it was like limp spaghetti. It
Yeah.
was like so many strands of thinner copper wire, but it was like so flexible. So I bought one of those. I started using those on my bikes. And now with some of the wiring I did, I bought battery cables that had many, many more strands of smaller gauge wire. But it's like, I don't even know how many strands there would be. In a regular battery cable, maybe there's 40. So this has like maybe 100. And I still have some samples of it. It's like,
That's a good question. He's asking about with the RV because he's got using solar and he's got batteries and he's also using an inverter. So he's converting to 110. Now, does this make sense that if he takes this and we have a big motorhome that we use at the track, so I'm thinking myself about this right now because we have an inverter and a bank of batteries and all that crap. Does it make sense if you go to park an RV somewhere like that, and you're going to use the solar and the inverter to actually have an auxiliary ground that you would take out and spike into the ground?
I've seen a guy do that in
Not
Florida.
a bad idea.
Earth and ground
That
rod.
would work.
Yep.
Not a bad idea.
Which I might do that.
Like you
Because-
just when you park it and you're camping or whatever, or even when it's just parked, you just got to remember. But yeah, just spike.
I think some of the RV places already have spike. When you get the pad, there's already a spike there to hook up if you want.
That's
They
perfect.
do, right?
Clip
Yeah,
on
I
there.
think I've seen that.
Yeah. Now, like in my tool truck, it's all regular wire. It's not like household wire in there. and I have the inverter, battery, and everything like
Marine
that.
wire.
And like I said, it's just regular wire, and it does. Now I have changed, like when I changed battery cables, because I have to make. I actually used audio cables, which had more more like that monster cable stuff,
Yeah,
and I
more
made
strength.
my own ends. And I did not go with gold ends on it, but you could. Now, the one in my backup inverter that I have came out of one of my stereo systems, and it does have where it has a gold plated.
All right. So what I wanted to say about that was, this is where I'm confused now, because one of the things I do on the side is I refoam speakers. I can refoam them and rebuild the speaker instead of throwing it out. So I've taken apart Altec Lansings, Bose. I have a pair of Allisons from the Christian. You should have these. I got 2 pair of Allison speakers from the 60s. It was an English company. And you take the driver out, and they're wired with like 22 gauge wire. And even on a car, you take a speaker out of a car door. I don't care, the most premium sounds that my boss had a Bose system in it. They use like a 22 gauge wire.
Yeah.
They're not using monster cable, and
No.
those things sound like phenomenal. So it just blew my mind that everything I learned or thought I learned is now I'm seeing like I said, these speakers from the 60s have thin gauge wire inside to run the drivers. These are house speakers, and they'll take you can put 100 watts through them, and they sound like concert hall. So I don't know. I think I gotta maybe change my beliefs here. I don't know.
Well, that's something to ask. Like the guys I'm on the GRMS radio membership with, they're all old CB guys, and one of which, Rich, he used to work at Main Street Stereo. So
Okay.
I'll ask him about that, because he's
Okay.
pretty knowledgeable, because he's done all sorts of. He was throughout all of that era of Main Street Stereo doing monster cable install. It was probably just something to sell to you.
Yeah, I mean, I bought it, and the problem was then you got the monster cable, but the connectors on the back of the speaker you couldn't put the cable in because it was too small. So they made adapters for that now too. I mean, like my Bose speakers have a binding post with a brass nut.
Yep.
Literally, you can just wrap it around. I've actually crimped ring terminals on it.
So you
that.
want to do
Yeah,
those
but you
901s
also
like that?
probably also have to look, because we run into I've ran into this problem looking at different gauge wire and what the strands are, and I bet you anything the smaller ones in there are probably a more premium wire or copper tint than a regular.
I bet you
I mean,
that's it.
I made the mistake. I wanted to put floodlights underneath on the tool truck, so when I'm loading a box or taking a box off at night, I can turn it on and it lights up around the truck so I can see. And the wires that came with that, showed that they were 16 gauge, but when I opened it up, there was like, 4 strands of wire in there.
That's the cheaper brand of wire, right?
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. But now when you're looking inside your classic, stereo thing, that 22 gauge wire might be a different strand. It might be the size, just like the Monster. Remember the Monster cables, the Monster battery cables, or the 4 gauge was the same size. It just had 3 times as much copper in it, or it had the finer strands.
Yeah,
for that.
That's what I use. That's what I use for my battery cables. It's a 4 gauge. It's not a 4. No, it is a 4. But right, it's actually, and you can measure the resistance per foot. It's less resistance than an O gauge or double O gauge with the thicker wire in it.
Right. So that's why, I mean, you were saying, well, oh man, on this older unit still had the small wire. Well, it could be what the strands were inside. It's a better quality wire.
It has to be.
I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
It has to be.
So, I mean, like I said, I bought the floodlights to put on, and I was on run those wires, and I'm looking at it, and I stripped it, and I'm like, what the fuck is this, dude? It's got like, hell, the wires weren't even flexible, basically. It was
Right.
a different grade copper. So I run up to, of course, we don't have Radio Shack anymore, but I run up to the auto parts store and start looking, and the next thing you know, you're running around looking for a better wire. I mean, there's all kinds of different grades.
I was lucky because the auto parts store by me did have it, and that's where I bought my battery cables, and I bought it in bulk. I'm kind of like roughing it out, and like my positive cable, I wanted to bring it around from the battery down the fender well, kind of across the firewall, and then down to keep it away from the header. So I had to go a little longer. I wasn't worried because I knew it was, like I said, many more strands of wire in there. But I think at the time I was paying, I don't know, $8 or $12 a foot. So it was like, I'll take 15 feet of that, and it's like it's 6 feet of black for the ground. And I was like, what are you gonna do? Jump rope?
That's the only problem with our society or our world today. You have good, better, or best. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
you're 100% right with that. Because
you can look at it and say, oh, it looks like the same size, but once you cut it open, you're like, well, how come this has only got 3 strands and this one's got 9?
Yeah, I got a copper pipe in my basement that I cut out of this house from 1950. And if I bought a new piece of copper pipe from Home Depot and I tried to solder the same thing together, it's a huge difference. So what you're saying, it makes complete sense because we had a copper company on Long Island called Chero. Chero was one of our resources here that made copper wire and pipe. And anytime I got a pipe or a wire that said Chero on it, I was like, I know that's good copper. So there is a huge difference. You're 100% correct on that. And it makes sense with the speakers and all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's why, like I said, when I rip something apart, something old, I save all that stuff.
Me too.
That's
it's scary.
That's way better stuff. Or better, whatever. And going back, I had to do copper pipe. I mean, the copper pipe in my house, it's the house is as old as me. And it's 57 years old, and I've had a few places, and I made the same mistake. I walked in to Home Depot, bought this one copper pipe, came home, and I'm like, man, this is junk.
It's junk.
And I was like, man, I can't. This is crazy. So I went back up and I started digging around, and they had two different types there. There's 2 different types, and there's a paint line on the
one's red, one's blue.
Yeah. Right. And when I first saw it, I thought, I don't know why they would make copper hot and copper cold, but okay, whatever.
No, it's not. Yeah, no.
Today this pipe is identifying as red, and this one's identifying as blue. I don't want to ask any questions. But then when I went back and looked, you could see the difference. One was a different. Now you paid a little bit more, but it was closer to what I had from 50 years ago. Because the guy told me, he said, you buy this cheaper stuff. He said within 10 years you're going to replace it.
Yeah, it's no good. No, and if you don't have anything with cars or a house, but even in Lou's case with the RV, it's the quality of the stuff, and it's so vulnerable to the elements on top of the fact of quality. So, why would you want to build an RV with all this crap, and then in 10 years it's going to be no good? So there's no real test bed for the PEX, right? So like everyone's throwing PEX and everything, and even in the vehicles too, because like half of these RVs are all, the PEX is great because you could sneak it through and less connections and no soldering and all that stuff. But it hasn't been out long enough, so we don't know.
Well, I'll know in 10 years.
Yeah, you're gonna. That's unfortunately the crazy thing. Like when I always made fun of Ray about the stupid ground wires all over his GTO, but it makes sense that like his anode hasn't even done anything because it's got like the perfect electrolysis going on through the whole vehicle. I'm
going to show you a couple things.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. You maybe go out to the garage. So this is like a regular battery cable.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
But the stuff that I used.
Is that 4-aught?
Yeah.
This is like one of the brushes that I use on the drum set. There's so many strands of wire in here.
But that's good for welding.
It's like a brush. It literally is like a brush, and they're actually soft.
Yeah, but that's like welding wire. So like a welding.
Yeah.
Cable.
You look at a welding ground versus a regular ground, it's going to look like that, right? It's going to be much finer.
Right. So that's what I use for battery cables. And
I mean, there's a reason for that with doing a TIG welding. I'm just saying because the TIG welding it deals with a lot of frequencies and stuff too.
right.
So I guess that's why they do that. But it's the same thing. I notice a difference in MIG wire. Okay, if you buy MIG wire and it's not from Canada, it's over. The Canadian MIG wire I think works better than the wherever the heck, the Harbor Freight stuff or whatever that stuff is.
Brian, it's like what we were talking about. I found it on now working on a lot of older Mustangs, 60s era Mustangs, and I'm finding that the wiring, it just doesn't hold up. It's like on every car I've worked on, the wiring is literally, you can just crack it. I'm curious who the supplier was for Ford's wire back then, because, I mean, they probably figured, hey, these cars are going to last 5 years. They'll be out of warranty. We don't care.
Right.
But I'm very curious about that. I don't know if I could ever find the.
Well, what about all the connectors now too? Like, where are you sourcing connectors from? You used to get really good connectors.
This is another one. See how many
I'm
wires are in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going through the connector problem right now.
Yeah. So what's going on?
Okay. I reverted to, well, there's a couple of companies. There's a couple of good companies. Shit. And now, of course, I can't think of the name off the top of my head. American Auto Wire is one of them that sells good stuff. My buddy Tony at C&E Electric. That's the guy that wrote those books that I always show. He sells connectors. But I'll go even just terminals, like ring terminals. There's a big difference in terminals.
That's what I'm talking. Yeah, any of that stuff. It's
and there's another name. It just flashed through my head. One of the things I've always done is I save old harnesses. The factory GM stuff, and other manufacturers too. I haven't seen them all. Use some of the best connectors and has some of the best crimps in the world. So I've actually used a factory crimped end and then spliced into the wire, cut an end of it and then spliced into the wire because I know I can make a good splice.
Yeah.
And relied on that. But WeatherPack, I've been going to WeatherPack a lot and doing a lot of my own WeatherPack stuff.
And WeatherPack is what? They sell stuff for like the amp connectors, the Molex and everything else, and the Deutsch, or?
No, the WeatherPack is the factory GM or factory standard now for any car where it's, just a waterproof, because there's a bellows on this. It's a waterproof connector. But it's just this 2 spades. It's 2 terminals that interlock. And
so Lou, what are you working with? Ring terminals, butt connectors, all that stuff?
Like to splice wires together, or to make an end. Like if you want to, if you have something that's a male end, you need the female as part of it. But so you can buy the male and female ends. But like on a lot of the sensors on the cars and the fuel injection stuff, the end of the sensor on the vehicle is a WeatherPack. So you can make a connector to mate to that. That's what I do with my fuel injection system. I did all WeatherPack stuff. And the stuff's available even through Amazon. I was buying I got the tool and some of the connectors right from Amazon. But I tell the guys at the shop, I said, you get a good harness out of a late model car. I said, just put it on the side for me. I said, I want to cut out those WeatherPack connectors because I have the tools to remove them and you can reuse the housings. You just have to buy the new pins, right? And they're readily available.
Yeah.
And the housings are get a little expensive, especially when you get into like 4 and 5 pin ones.
Yep. But what's Lou? What's your situation? What's going on?
So I'm upgrading my solar equipment. So I'm doing 2-aught cables on my batteries. So the ring connectors, I bought some off Amazon and they're brass, but man, you can bend them with your hand.
Yeah, they're malleable.
Yeah. So I just ordered a better set. I'm waiting on. They should be here tomorrow. So that's what I'm working on now.
I might be able to help you out because I got a guy who listens to the show. My buddy at the UD, Dougie, he works for the MTA, and he gave me a couple of handfuls of connectors that the MTA uses, and
Yeah,
they are
that's good
heavy
stuff,
copper.
yeah.
So,
Well,
and the trick to that, Lewis, is when I was doing the bigger cables like the battery stuff, I wanted to crimp it. And Brian, I was talking to you about it. They still sell that old, like I guess, like the guillotine crimper you put on the bench and you whack it with a hammer.
Yeah,
It actually works pretty damn good.
it does.
But I went
I
to
have-
Harbor Freight and I bought their freaking. It's a hand pump pneumatic crimping tool,
Mhm.
and it does from like 12 gauge up to O or double O. So the fact that it could go down to 12 gauge is ridiculous. But I use it for like the 4 gauge, the battery cables, and a lot of 12 and 10 gauge, and it makes a real. It'll actually make an octagonal crimp, which is I read up on it. It's one of the best crimps that you can get. They
Yeah,
actually make you die for an octagonal crimp.
That's what I have. I have it's the hydraulic.
That's the one. Yeah.
So my problem is it's in millimeters, the dies.
Okay.
So you got to kind of guess which one fits.
Mine are in wire gauge. Mine are in AWG.
No,
I know it's 12 up to O.
yeah. See, mine is on it's an Amazon unit.
Well, there should be a conversion. There should be a conversion chart to tell you
Well,
what's what.
I did.
I know that this is going to upset a few people.
Uh-oh.
Okay. And we're all guilty of
wait for. This is the part of the night we wait for when Brian.
Yeah, I know that. I'm trying very hard.
Hey, should I log off first?
Well, no, I'm just going to tell you. I'm just going to tell you how it is.
Okay.
All right.
You cannot save a nickel when it costs you a dime.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good.
And if you're going to buy the shit off Amazon, you're going to get shit.
Yeah.
But you can get good stuff
There's
off Amazon too.
No. There's a few things that you can get that's a good deal or what. But the majority, it's just, hey, look, I have nothing against Harbor Freight. You want to go buy Harbor Freight tools? That's no problem. I'm guilty of it too. But as I showed Ray the other day, I went because I was impatient because I wanted to start cutting on my car.
Right,
and I had ordered cutting discs, paid big money because it's USA stuff, good quality cutting discs. And I had to wait a couple days, but I was impatient. Went down, blew $9 for their best at Harbor Freight, and they all blew apart on me. It took me 5 of them to do one thing. I'm still using a 3-inch wheel for a USA one.
Yeah.
And I blew apart 5.
See, I gotta say, I think they might have changed their supplier because I have a drawer full of Harbor Freight. I guess they're 3-inch ones I bought years ago. I have I should say I haven't shattered one yet.
Yeah. As time goes on and the way we are now, it's just like I'm looking for fenders for my car for the Mustang. I threw away reproduction ones. Okay. Right. Because when I had reproduction fenders and they were rusted, and this is before they had patch panels and stuff like that. And I said, oh, well, I'll try to find another set of fenders. Well, I could buy fenders today, and they're garbage. I would prefer to find a 30-year-old reproduction fender because it's going to fit. Everybody that gets a fender has to spend. They buy a fender for $200 instead of the $800, but they pay a guy 5 hours to try to make it fit on the car.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And unfortunately, butt connectors, and it's like I thought that it's just like electrical tape. I went and go to Harbor Freight. You could buy a 10-roll electrical tape for $2.50, and you go through half of it. It won't even stick.
You gotta buy 3M. No, that's
why it's Super 33. That's the only one.
Exactly.
So I mean, unfortunately, Lewis. I mean, when you're looking at that stuff, man, you that's why it drives me crazy today. Because unfortunately, I'm a touchy-feely kind of guy. Us big guys are touchy-feely. We like to touch things, so you got to watch out. But looking online, you can't see any of that shit. You don't even know.
No, you're true. That's why no Radio Shack. Come on,
That's right.
I know that you're trying to save. You're trying to be in the budget. We all are. I understand that, but
Well,
when
these
you're
ones I
buying that
bought.
shit from Amazon, dude, you're just asking for trouble. In 5 years, less than 5 years, you're going to be back in doing what you're doing over again.
I would say you got to ask. 'Cause
Unfortunately, I'm sorry.
That's why when I was doing my fuel injection system last year, I asked in this forum, I asked the guys, I said, I'm looking on Amazon, I'm looking at all these fittings, and I'm seeing names I don't know. And Keith had some information for me, and actually not Trevor,
They took our brick and mortar away.
Lewis, who worked on your
What's
bus?
his
They
name?
did.
Oh,
They
Tyler.
took it right out from
Tyler.
under our feet.
Tyler.
Tyler and Keith basically reformed some of these brands that I saw on Amazon, and I did buy those, and you know what? I have no problem. So there is good. You got to know how to find it, or you got to ask around. You got to ask what other people have used.
What I found with Amazon is you have to go to the B side. You don't go what's popular. You go and wait a couple days and get it from a different kind of supply. That's just my
Right.
thoughts on it. Because they put us in this world now, and this is the challenge. My biggest success, and this is for Lou too, my biggest success is to go to the local scrapyard and go picking. Because you will find that the scrapyard is going to have set aside piles of stuff that other shops have completely cleaned out and thrown out, butt connectors and wire, and that's where I get all my wire and butt connectors and anything. I just try and scavenge and pick through the scrapyard because that's where the good stuff is, believe it or not.
Phenolic.
Yeah. Hey, it's crazy as it seems. People. I was at the ham radio swap meet month and a half back, and these guys are weird. These radio people they're a little weird, man, but they can't wait to go to that swap meet because there's a guy that shows up at the swap meet that takes about 800 tables up, and it's like a Radio Shack on wheels.
Yeah.
But the guy's got all of the new NOS stuff. Every resistor, every triad, every transistor is original stuff. And these old timers know. They go, and the guy's got these little baskets, and these guys go picking through all this stuff. They know what they're getting, because you can't get that stuff on Amazon. The two transistors, the one from the new NOS from a place that got cleaned out that this guy's grabbing and selling at a swap meet, is what you need, not the one that you're ordering from Amazon. And that, I get it. I'm not. Well, go ahead.
Like you said, that's like I go into a shop and the guy's cleaning up, especially since it's so slow now. These guys are throwing away stuff.
Yeah.
The guy threw away 3 battery chargers. And I said, "What are you doing with the battery chargers? They don't work." Throw them away. Well, what's the main thing on a battery charger?
Transformer.
The clamps.
The alligators, the clips, yeah.
The alligator clamps.
Okay.
They're metal. Everything today is plastic. You know how many guys come and say, "I need a new cable because the plastic, they can't use it."
I know. I have 3 sets of them hanging in my garage that I salvaged off of battery chargers. I swear to God.
You have to, in order to get.
I got one here the other day.
I'm going to sell one on eBay.
I take the cables off and I put them on a truck. It's like toolboxes. Somebody will say, you gave the guy $500 for that old box. It's not. The thing's falling apart. I go home and I take the casters off it. Everybody loves to have a good set of casters.
Yeah.
They want to build they want to build a platform to put a motor on or whatever. What's the first thing they do? They run down to Harbor Freight. They buy these 1995 casters that are supposed to be rated for 250 pounds. They put a motor on it and they go to try to push it across the shop and it falls apart.
It collapses. Yeah.
And then I walk in, they come out on the truck and they say, "Where are those casters from?" It's from an old toolbox. How much you want for them? $100. $100.
Hey, even my
They'll
Matco
never have a fucking problem with it.
My Matco mechanics chair I still have to this day. I replaced with original Matco casters. I didn't go that route, and it still holds up. I've had that thing for 30 years.
Unfortunately, the world we live in, and this stuff that you spent. I'm guilty of it too, dude. I've got 4 file cabinets over here of connectors that are fucking garbage that I've spent money for.
I prototype with Amazon. then once I build something out of an Amazon project, then I see what works. Like even with my maple sugaring, I built a RO system. I got everything from Amazon, to slap this thing together. I concentrated maple sap and I got my sugar content to work with the RO, and I said, okay, it works. That's not to say that I'm going to, now I know it works. I'm going to go and build something better, or I'm going to buy a better one, but it comes in handy for that. If you're doing a quick project and you want a prototype before you actually invest into something huge, that's what I find Amazon good for in that situation. Would I buy a crankshaft from Amazon?
No.
I could probably get a rotating for that Mustang you got there, a nice little 331 kit right off of Amazon.
It's like I said, though, it all depends what you're getting. My daughter, I'm rehabbing the apartment upstairs for my daughter to move up, and she's buying a lot of stuff. I mean, literally, my house looks like a fucking Amazon warehouse most days.
Oh, and Wayfair, right?
Not a lot. She's an Amazon girl, but she bought a corner unit for the bathroom that was like out of that faux wood, and then another thing to go over, the unit to go over the toilet bowl or the toilet tank, and I had to build them, so it was like IKEA all over again. But and this stuff looked really nice. I know that the finish on it was like a veneer, and I said okay, but it was nice and sturdy. Cam lock connectors, very nice. And at one point, I had to notch two of the legs to clear the lid on the old 6-gallon toilet bowl that I didn't get rid of. So I made a couple cuts and I went in there with a chisel, and I swear to God, this stuff is made out of high pressure. Now you can drill it, you can cut it. It acts like wood, but it's literally compressed sawdust, and then they put a veneer over it to look like wood grain, and it makes a solid piece of furniture at the end of the day. I know she didn't spend a whole hell of a lot of money, but it was better than the IKEA crap I've built. And even the carpenter I had doing some work looked and he says, wow, this looks like some pretty nice stuff. Where'd you get this? I was like, well, Amazon. So again, you gotta, I probably got lucky really, but it's a matter of
just hopefully it won't get wet. Where you better reseal it. Where you cut it, you better reseal it, because once moisture gets in there, it'll swell up like you a fat girl eating a bologna sandwich.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
Making me hungry now.
We had one of those. We had one of those that go over the tank, and it's got the stilts or whatever, and it kept knocking over. So what I was going to do is I was going to mount it to the wall, and then cut the stilts off where it just hangs.
Okay.
Well, when I was in the middle of doing it, at some point, for whatever stupid reason, I was standing on the seat of the toilet, lost my balance, took a tumble into the shower. My foot hit the unit. It came down and hit me square in the nose. I have a dent across my nose now. This was like 2015, 2013.
Yeah.
And I hit. My wife heard me hit the wall in the bottom of the shower, and then here's this thing crash into my face, and she walks in. She goes, "You okay in there?" And I'm going, "Fuck!" So I hit the ground. I hit the tub. I'm in here. This thing crashed into me, and she goes, "You want help?" And I said, "Does it sound like it?" And she goes, "Okay, I'll leave you alone."
Yeah, no, it's even mollies, like when you're talking about hanging something on the wall, even the quality of the mollies or any of the stuff they got. So the guy that works at Orient, a front salesman, his father, back in the 50s, supposedly there was a Molly of the Month club. And they would send you like different types of mollies and screw mollies and all that stuff. And he still has all this stuff. And I'm like thinking now, I might want to take that off his hands now.
Yeah.
Like, when's the last time you had a really good, and I use a lot of swedge nuts and stuff for like the race trailer. Like I got to put new and change everything around. So I'm using the riv nuts. So like, who's making a good riv nut? Who's making a good molly? Who's making a good anchor? Even it's crazy. I still,
Redhead connectors. Redhead makes some really good molly connectors.
Yeah, it's funny though that it existed, that there was a Molly of the Month club. Like it was like a real. I have to check it out. I'm gonna have to dig that up and check it out. But I remember back in the day, you put a molly in, you could tighten a screw and it would expand behind the wall, and
Right.
You could hang a like the the guy with the crazy glue with the hard hat.
Yeah, yeah.
Remember that commercial?
Oh yeah.
Well, hey guys, I'm gonna jump ship.
Yeah,
My eyes are getting
we'll
heavy.
have a show and we'll hang for a bit.
Lou, you need to go to your local scrapyard, get friendly with the guy. Not in that way, but get friendly with him to the point where he'll allow you to go pick through his scrapyard. And I guarantee you'll find really good wire and cable ends and everything that you could probably buy back at scrap price. It work out better for that RV that you're doing than buying anything from Amazon. That's just
Lewis, check out Wire Care.
Wire
They're
Care.
out of New Jersey. They do some pretty good stuff.
Yeah, I've got some stuff from them.
I'll write that down myself.
Well, Moto Gadget sells harness kits for bikes. Moto Gadget has their own wire, and each wire will tell you, headlight, left, right, directional, and all that stuff. Good quality wire, but you're paying for it. But you only get enough to do the job that you're doing. When you want to buy rolls of that stuff. But that kind of high quality wire, I find when they do cleanouts. What's that right there?
This another guy who's very good, Ron Francis.
They do nice stuff.
There you go.
They sell only the best of the best.
Yeah, you got to figure out who's selling. Who's working with the stuff every day. Talk to your electrician. They'll tell you, they'll tell you they all tell you not to go to Home Depot. That's for sure.
Well, like I said, my buddy Tony Candela wrote these books, the automotive electric books. C&E Electrical. He's out, I think, in Nevada, and he's on Instagram. He's on social media, but he has a store. He has a shop, and he'll sell stuff too. That's where I got this wire from him.
And that aircraft too. Aircraft has to have higher quality stuff.
Oh, sure.
So, and marine grade. I mean, there's so many different options with
Unless
connectors.
they're flying out of the airport down by Bryan, because those guys are all crashing.
Well,
They can't fly a plane out of that.
Easy.
I've had a lot of discussion about that helicopter crash, but
I read something in the Post, and they were talking about a nut